Welcome to our YouTube channel, a place where the darkest corners of reality come alive through chilling audiobooks. Here, we bring you spine-tingling tales inspired by real crimes, untold mysteries, and the unseen horrors that lurk within society. So, sit back, turn off the lights, and prepare yourself for another terrifying journey into the unknown. Adamsville had always looked quiet from the outside, a small Alabama town tucked between the pine-covered ridges and the winding creeks of Jefferson County. Its streets curved softly through neighborhoods where porches sagged with age and church bells still echoed on Sunday mornings. But when the wind cut across the hills at night, when the streetlights flickered and the dogs began to bark at nothing, something older seemed awake beneath the stillness. People in Adamsville didn't talk about ghosts in public. Not really. They might hint, exchange glances, or cross themselves when someone mentioned Bottenfield Middle School. Some kids whispered about it behind the bleachers, daring each other to sneak into the band wing after hours. But the older folks, the ones who'd lived through generations here, spoke more quietly about Indian Meadows, about Shady Grove, about the ground that should never been built on. They said the soil itself remembered. It always began with small things. A custodian at Bottenfield once told how, late one evening in October, he had been sweeping near the choir room when he heard a faint note, just one, long and trembling, like a trumpet warming up. He thought maybe one of the band students had stayed behind. The doors were supposed to be locked, but sometimes a teacher forgot. He followed the sound down the narrow hall. It came again, this time softer, and from behind the door of the practice room. When he opened it, the room was empty. He stood there, broom in hand, staring at the row of music stands, the sheet music left scattered on the floor, and the faint smell of brass polish in the air. He turned to leave, and that's when he saw him. Just for a second, a young man stood near the far wall, his face half hidden by the reflection of the fluorescent light in the glass window. He looked about 17, maybe 18, dressed in what looked like a marching band uniform. His eyes met the custodian's. And then he was gone, vanished. The man swore later that he felt the air turn colder. Like somebody left a freezer door open, he said. He never finished that shift. Other teachers saw him too. Some claimed they'd catch glimpses through the hallway mirrors near the choir wing, or hear the faint echo of a snare drum tapping somewhere deep in the building when no one else was there. A choir director once found the piano keys pressed down in a perfect chord, C minor, though she was the only one in the room. Nobody talked about it officially, of course. Principals came and went. Repairs were made, and the story stayed buried under the hum of fluorescent lights and school announcements. But the students kept the legend alive. They said the ghost was a boy who had died years ago, maybe in the 1970s, maybe later. No one knew for sure. Some said he'd been in the marching band, one of the best trumpet players the school had ever had. On the night of a big football game, his car had gone off the road near the bend that led toward the school. The wreck was bad. When the search team found him, they said his trumpet case was still in the passenger seat, the instrument untouched. Since then, his spirit wandered the halls, searching for the music he never got to play. During the day, the school buzzed like any other, bells ringing, laughter echoing, teachers calling out assignments. But at night, when the building emptied and the last of the cars rolled out of the parking lot, Bottenfield turned into something else entirely. Security cameras sometimes caught odd flashes near the band wing, brief streaks of light that looked like motion blur, but too bright, too fast. Once, a janitor caught the faint sound of a trumpet riffing a slow, mournful tune that faded just before he reached the door. One night, 2 students snuck in after hours on a dare. They wanted to prove the stories were just stories. They made it as far as the main hallway before one of them stopped. He said he could feel something, like someone walking right behind him, just out of sight. When he turned, no one was there. The next morning, teachers found the hallway lights flickering and a single footprint in the dust. One, pressed clearly into the thin film of grit that gathered near the door. Just one, barefoot. That was when talk about the ghost spread again. But it wasn't just a school that carried old shadows. About 3 miles west of Bottenfield, the neighborhoods of Indian Meadows and Shady Grove stretched quietly along the tree line. Ranch-style houses sat low and modest, surrounded by thick woods. The air smelled of pine sap, and red clay. At dusk, it could be beautiful there, the kind of place where crickets hummed and porch lights flicked on one by one. But when darkness deepened, the woods seemed to move. Locals said the land had once belonged to Cherokee. Before the houses were built, before the roads cut through, the hills had held an ancient burial ground. Construction crews in the 1970s uncovered artifacts, fragments of pottery, even what looked like bones, but no one wanted to stop the project. They paved over the site, built homes, and planted neat lawns. From then on, the whispers began. People started hearing footsteps outside their windows late at night. Not the slow shuffle of the person walking by, but quick, light steps that darted and stopped and then started again, like someone circling the house. One woman said she woke to the sound of breathing right outside her bedroom window. When she turned on the porch light, there was nothing, just the wet leaves shifting in the wind. The next morning, she found prints in the mud that led toward the woods. The prints were small, like those of a child, but they stopped halfway across the yard, as if whoever made them had simply disappeared. A man on Shady Grove Lane said he often heard scratching sounds at night, sometimes on the siding, sometimes on the porch rail. He once rushed outside with flashlight, expecting to find a raccoon or stray dog, but found nothing, except for 3 deep gouges carved into the wood near the door. They looked like claw marks, rough and uneven, as though something had dragged its nails down the grain. Families began keeping lights on all night. Some moved away quietly, leaving their houses dark and hollow, sold cheap to the next brave buyer. Children talked about seeing dark figures running through the woods, tall shadows that darted between trees, silent except for the crunch of leaves. A boy walking home from a friend's house swore he saw someone standing just beyond the streetlight, tall, still, wearing what looked like old clothing. When he blinked, the figure was gone. Dogs howled for no reason. Electrical appliances turned on by themselves, televisions flickering to static, radios whispering faint voices that cut off the second someone entered the room. In Indian Meadows, a young couple once invited friends over for a barbecue. It was a warm August evening, the air heavy with the smell of grilled meat and charcoal. They were laughing when suddenly, every light in the house went out. At first, they thought it was a blown fuse, but the street lights were still on. The darkness inside was thick, pressing. Then came the footsteps. Soft, steady, walking across the floorboards of the living room. Everyone froze. The host called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Just another step, closer this time. When the lights flickered back, nothing was there. The furniture stood exactly as before, the back door still locked. But on the glass patio door, someone had drawn a single handprint, smeared across the inside. Later that night, one of the guests said she woke to the sound of her name being whispered in her ear. She was sure it was a dream until she saw the indentation on the pillow beside her, as if someone had been lying there. Stories like that never made the papers. They passed from neighbor to neighbor, hushed at church, murmured in diners. Everyone had a version, or knew someone who did. There was the man who worked nights at the steel plant and came home just before dawn. He'd park his truck, step out into the fog, and hear footsteps behind him every single time. Steady, measured, following until he reached his porch. When he turned to look, nothing. One morning, he waited. He stood by his truck and called out into the mist. The air smelled like rain and iron. "I know you're there," he said. The sound stopped. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then, something whispered back. He could never remember the exact words, only that it sounded old, like wind moving through dry leaves. After that, he started parking closer to the road. By the mid-2000s, paranormal investigators began hearing about the area. A few came with their recorders and night vision cameras, setting up near the edge of the woods. Most caught nothing but static and wind. But one team claimed that, when they played their recordings back, a faint drumbeat echoed beneath the static. Steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The local sheriff's office received calls from time to time. Lights flickering in abandoned houses. Motion sensors tripped in homes long empty. Deputies would drive out, sweep the area, and find nothing but unlocked doors and cold air. They stopped taking the calls seriously after a while. Still, some things they couldn't explain. In 2011, a family in Indian Meadows woke one night to find every door in their house wide open, the front, the back, even the closets. No signs of forced entry. No footprints in the dew outside. The alarm had never gone off. They moved out a month later. Others simply learned to live with it. You don't bother them, one woman said, and they won't bother you. She said it like a rule passed down from long ago, something older than any of the new street names or house numbers. On certain nights, when the air was still and the moon low, people said they could see faint lights moving among the trees, blue and white, darting between the trunks like fireflies. Some believed they were spirits of the Cherokee, guarding what was taken. Others thought they were the same restless souls that wandered the school hallways, drawn by the music that once filled the land. A retired teacher who had worked at Bottenfield for 30 years swore she saw the young man once, standing at the far end of the band hall. He looked so lost, she said, like he didn't know where he was anymore. She said he turned toward her, opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came. Then he faded into the dark. After she retired, she stopped driving past the school altogether. The town carried on as towns do. New families moved in. Old ones left. The school kept playing its football games. The marching band still practiced every afternoon. Sometimes, during late rehearsals, a trumpet would play just slightly out of sync with the others. One note off, one breath too long. The students would laugh it off, saying someone missed their cue. But now and then, the conductor would stop, raise his head, and listen. He looked toward the empty corner of the room, as if hearing something the others couldn't. Out in Indian Meadows and Shady Grove, the woods grew thicker each year. Houses aged, paint peeled, fences leaned. On foggy nights, headlights caught strange shapes in the trees. Too tall to be animals, too quick to be human. People shut their doors early. Even today, those who live there say that if you walk through those neighborhoods after midnight, you'll feel it. The sense that you're being watched. The soft crunch of leaves behind you. The low hum of the wind whispering through branches. If you stop and listen, sometimes you'll hear footsteps pacing just out of sight. If you call out, there won't be an answer, only the echo of your own voice, and maybe, faintly, the distant sound of a trumpet, carrying to the dark Alabama air. And by the time you turn around, whatever was there will already be gone,